Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Nooksville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
Thank you for chatting today.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I saw Allison the other day and told her we were recording a podcast. So she was so excited for us to flush it out. So,
Yeah.
Well, I would love, so you are Consultant Barbie over on Instagram. You are actually a doctor. You have a PhD. And so I would love to, before we jump into the neuroscience of authenticity and success, I would love for you to tell everyone who you are.
Sure. And I can say now, because people know what it means, thanks to President Joe Biden, regardless of your political standings, there was a big hubbub about her degree. So she is Dr. Biden, but it's an EDD. And so I actually have an EDD as well. The difference between an EDD and a PhD is rooted to like one Latin course a number of years ago when they diverged. But the idea is that PhD folks typically do more research and EDD folks typically do more application and are working with their knowledge a little differently. So it was really interesting to watch that play out. Not that that's what you asked me about, but it was really interesting to watch that play out as someone who has explained my degree so many times to so many people. So that was kind of a fun connection to draw with a person that I have had respect for a very long time. So anyhow,
Awesome. Thank you for addressing that, by the way, because it was just in the media. And I think it's an important thing to point out. So thank you.
Well, and I understand conceptually. So the article was not appropriate. Let's start with that. But I understand conceptually that when I introduce myself or get introduced on a stage as Dr. Michalski, assumptions are made. If I don't reference being a clinician, or if I'm not speaking at a place where it would make sense that I was a clinician, the assumption is that I have a PhD. And I'm hoping that will continue to evolve and grow, because it is one term that defines so many different spaces. And I recognize that can be different. Again, don't agree with how the article was framed in any way, but I do get that because I do things like neuroscience, people just assume that I'm a big research nerd, which is true, but I am a practice-based, application-based doctoral human.
And that's why I wanted, because you are a research-based nerd, as a self-proclaimed nerd.
I am the nerdiest of nerds.
I love it because I say all this stuff, but I'm like, I can't back this up. But like, I know I read it somewhere, or I talked to someone one time about it. So I'm like, oh, yes, Dr. Erika, give me everything.
You get to be a nerd by proxy, though. That's totally,
yes. I'm a hardcore nerd by proxy.
Love it. My background is in education. What I think is really fun about my background is I started in early childhood education, and I was a preschool teacher, which is why my office looks like this. Actually, my office looks like I should still be a preschool teacher, but it turns out this is just who I am as a human. You can't see this side, but same amount of colors. And I had to recently buy a secondary bulletin board because my current bulletin board is covered with no work and only pictures and pictures of my family, pictures drawn by my family, a picture that my mother-in-law had that my husband drew when he was in 4th grade. Like, I have the weirdest collection of chaotic inspiration.
That's awesome.
Call it. But I started in education, early childhood education, early childhood development in preschool. And over a series of hiccups and traumas and lots of different things, my life did what most people's life does and evolved in an unexpected collection of ping pong moments. And I moved into a master's in education in higher ed. So student affairs administration, collegiate student leadership development, that was the space that I went into in graduate school. And then ultimately my doctoral work is in andragogy, which is a word nobody knows. Makes me really, they talk all the time about how the elitism of creating words so that people don't know them. I did not create this word. But most of us know pedagogy, right? We've heard of this. This is how curriculum is written for K through 12. Andragogy is rooted in the idea that what you do in a 2nd grade classroom doesn't make sense for adults. And so andragogy is the adult equivalent of pedagogy.
I need you to explain the both of those words.
Okay. So
it's gonna be real.
It's okay. No, look, I love it. So when we are talking about developmentally where someone is in their learning process, pedagogy is how you would design a kindergarten classroom rooted in where they are developmentally, emotionally, all those things. And so the curriculum that any educator uses is rooted in these theories of development and where their knowledge is and what they are capable of. And of course, it's a spectrum, certainly, because what works for one kindergartner doesn't work for any other kindergartner sometimes. I have a kindergartner. I'm very aware of this. So the curriculum that you would design would be anchored in principles of pedagogy for K through 12. And then andragogy is that same idea, but for adults.
Got it.
And if you think about it, a college student, a 22-year-old doesn't want to be taught the same way as a second grader. And there's theory that says that it wouldn't work even if you tried. What we also see in higher ed is that some people are still trying anyway. And so it's interesting. Or you'll see research on higher education principles or adult learning, but they will reference pedagogy. And it's like one of those things, because I know what I know, that just like the hair on the back of my neck stands up. And I sort of just am like, do your one extra step of research and make sure that part's right. So that is where I did my doctoral work. My dissertation was on interprofessional education in healthcare. So I was looking at how, when you go through anything in the medical space as a patient, you have a team of people that are supporting you. The physician isn't the only one you interact with. You got a nurse, you got a pharmacist, you may have a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a social worker. There are a lot of different people in this space. Oh, that's my dog. She'll make an appearance, I'm sure.
I got my two right here too.
This is her favorite place to be because she thinks if she sits here long enough and huffs and puffs, I'll take her on a walk, which I will, but don't tell her. So anyhow, I looked at the way that students in healthcare spaces were being taught to understand the dynamic of the roles of other people. Because if you don't understand how they work, you don't know how to lean on them and draw from them. And then the healthcare process becomes really siloed. And silos are not completely avoidable. It's just how to build bridges between the silos. That's what I do a lot of. And maybe that's a good segue to what I'm doing now.
I like that visual, the building the bridge between the silos. That's like a good way to think of just so many things in our life.
Well, we talk a lot in professional spaces. Now in my life as consultant Barbie, my primary focus is helping people leverage who they are to get where they want to go. It's a really simple concept. The idea that authenticity is actually the best tool that you have once you understand how to use it. But I work with Fortune 500 companies. I work with small teams that have big dreams. I work with nonprofits who have tiny, tiny budgets. I work with academic institutions, university presidents. It kind of doesn't matter where they are, because my role isn't directly related to whether or not I've ever run a Fortune 500 business. My role in their lives is related to how to be a catalyst for your own evolution and how to then coach the evolution of the people around you. Because that's the whole point. Every day above ground is an opportunity for continued growth and evolution. And I like the term evolution because, nerd alert, I've also done a bunch of work in the evolution of humans, or research, I guess that's a better term, looking at the evolution of our human DNA. I feel like it's really important to pause here and say, I'm married to a molecular biologist, virologist. So I also have a really brilliant resource who eats dinner with me. I am not a scientist in that space, but I get to pick his brain a lot. It's really helpful. So I'm a proximal science nerd because of him.
So I get to be a proxy to proxy.
Yes.
Proxy nerd.
100%.
Yeah.
It's like you're a secondary proxy nerd.
Yeah, I'll take it once removed. Yeah.
So when we look at the evolution of human DNA, there are some components of who we are right now today that existed in beings on the first day. Evolution is about what you keep as you move forward and what you change. Sometimes there's a forced change. Sometimes there's a selected change. But when I talk about growth, I always include that word evolution because it feels more powerful and it feels like you have permission to really change. I think sometimes growth feels like, if you think about flowers, when a flower grows, it doesn't ever really change. It moves through phases, but most people wouldn't say a daffodil that you plant is anything but a daffodil when it comes up. If we only look at that growth model from that perspective of you're still going to be only this, it feels very limiting. Evolution says you can move in a lot of different directions. You can go a lot of ways. You can decide how you want to move forward, and moving forward is different than moving on. Moving on, when we have a trauma, for example, a lot of times people want to move on and they want to completely let go of all the pieces of it. And I respect and understand that. I've had my fair share of those types of experiences where you don't, and I understand the idea of there's always a lesson to learn, but sometimes honestly, that's not what you're looking for. You want to move on. I want to separate out. We see this a lot. One of the populations I work with a lot in my volunteer space is recovering addicts. They want to move on. They want to cut ties completely with a part of their life.
Yeah.
Moving forward says there are pieces that come with you as you continue to grow and evolve. And these aren't terms that anyone officially said. I made this up. This vernacular is something that I made up. Please don't try to research it or ask me to cite my sources, because this is how I view it. The coolest part about authenticity is I will be genuine with my perspectives and what I've seen that is effective. And I will respect wholeheartedly everyone who encounters that and says, I don't think that makes sense. It's okay. It's okay that it doesn't make sense, because it makes sense for me and it works for my clients. And so far I've had really great success with these concepts, but I recognize that I'm also not for everyone.
So funny. I posted a reel. So we're recording, today, but this will air in like a month, but today's reel that I posted was something that I have been doing my whole life to reduce my anxiety in the moment. And I just recently, stumbled across that it's scientifically legit. And this backstory is my BFF, from childhood when we were teenagers. She would always know when I was stressed, because I would go, and if you're listening to this, you'll hear it, but I would go,
sure,
do a raspberry. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. I would just do it. And she'd be like, well, obviously, oh, what's bothering you? I'm like, how do you know something's bothering me? And it's oh, and it's just something I realized I do it almost subconsciously when I'm just feeling anxious, and it makes me feel better. And so me being someone who's insecure with certain thoughts and opinions, well, this is what I think, I think this can help you reduce anxiety or stress. So then I saw the vagus nerve, if I said that right, it helps stimulate it, which helps create balance and regulate our system. And I was like, boom, boom, boom. But I, having the research to back it up makes me feel better. But one of my very favorite things, and I suspect you also have this happen as well, is because I am 37, I've been around a while. I've been doing this work for over a decade in various capacities of strategic planning and professional development and leadership development and all these things, and also had salary jobs when I wasn't in consulting. I mean, I've always done this on the side, but I ran a department for a nonprofit. I ran 2 different departments at universities. I was an associate dean. I did all these things. And sometimes I did these things because they sort of made sense to me in that moment. And now, or I had read a book and was trying to apply principles early on in my career. Now, when I read books, sometimes what happens, which is a different kind of magic, is some book tells me the thing that I've been doing for 10 years was the right choice. It's so great. I love it. I'm a huge proponent. This will shock you in 0 ways. I am a huge proponent of positive psychology and the role that it can play in the development of teams, the development of individuals, all these things. And there's a book called The Happiness Advantage, and it's been around a while. Are you laughing because you know this book? No, I'm laughing because I just don't, I don't know where you're going with it, but so I just was telling someone yesterday that one of the keys to success as far as people being wow, Sam, you have so much going on. I'm like, it's because I celebrate every little thing, because I get a phone call from someone who wants to work with me. And I tell you, and you think I've just booked a 5-year contract for $5 million. And I'm like, no, I was just excited to actually have the conversation. That brought me joy. And so I was like,
oh my God, we're going to be best friends for all eternity, just so we're clear. I want to come back to celebration in a hot minute. Let me finish this really thought before I realize 2 days from now that I never finished it. Cause that's
my bad.
No, you're good. No, that was perfect. Cause I'm so excited to talk about that. Oh my gosh. I don't know where you planned for this day to go, but it's going. We're on it. We're on it. There are no tracks, and we're on it. That's the most fun.
It's the neuroscience of success and authenticity, which this is all the like roundabout way of all the stuff. I feel like if it's working for you, but like spoiler, if it's working, do it.
And when we get to that neuroscience piece, you're going to find out that you've been doing yourself a solid for so long and you didn't even know. So I'm about to be one of those people that gives you that high five for being yourself. It's so great. Okay. So the happiness advantage talks a lot about the role that positivity can play in your life and all these things. And in my household, because we're both huge nerds, we have what I have dubbed unofficial marriage book club. And I listen to books while I walk the dog. So I'll listen to a book. And then if I think my partner will like it, then he will listen to it and we take turns. And he was listening to I love the happiness advantage because it was a really validating text for me. It was an opportunity for me to say, oh my gosh, these things that I've been doing that I have seen working in, anecdotal ways and some research to that extent, but mostly just anecdotal, like this has been working. And that's, it was really validating that this person who had done a ton of research and was a graduate of Harvard and super smart guy who also is really funny and doesn't take himself overly seriously, which I appreciate in nerds, basically wrote a book that said, Erika Michalski, keep doing it. And so that's really what it felt like. And Dan would come home sometimes from listening to a section, or he would get to work and text me. Sometimes he would also just voice text. We try really hard not to text while we're driving. This is an important lesson.
Yep.
But he has an hour commute every day. And he would be like, this book is you. And so it was really exciting because it was an opportunity for him to also see that what I'm doing makes complete sense, even though he has no reason to doubt it or question it. So it was just really fun. And I love when that happens. At this point in my career, I love that sometimes I read something that says, hey, you were right, instead of here's a new thing to try. So it's nice to have that balance. In the beginning of my career, it was really overwhelming that everything was like, here's a new thing to try. Here's a new thing to try. And you're sort of in this chaotic space of that. And what I have found across all professional development or self-help type books, or any books really, research books, all the books and articles, what I have found is the authenticity piece means so much because I can't apply certain things if they aren't part of my nature and who I am. So there are approaches that 100% do not make sense coming from me. That is why I'm not the only person in the world who does what I do. It's also why there's not only one book, because everyone responds to different things. And that's why I love the authenticity piece, because sometimes I get to say, you know what? I'm not for you in this approach, but I'm going to cheer for you and I'm going to support you. And I'm going to do some research to find how I can support you differently, because my approach is probably not the one you need. It's the same as when we coach folks to find a therapist. There are lots of different approaches to therapy, and some are really effective for certain people and some are not. And so the idea of being nimble and humble with your own self and your sense of awareness, authenticity for me, and the reason why I named a company Strategically Authentic, for heaven's sakes, is understanding who you are in the moment, understanding who you are in the middle of the chaos, knowing that to your core and knowing how to apply that and knowing how to listen to a book or read a book and say, that works for me, that doesn't work for me, and being capable of sifting through that knowledge, not because it's hard and you don't want to do it so it doesn't work for me, but because it's not in alignment with who I am and how I approach my life and my experience. So I find that really interesting and useful. And so the happiness if you are a positivity person out there in the universe and you feel like you get, poo-pooed a little bit because you are an extreme optimist, first of all, come find me. I'll be your extreme optimist buddy. And second of all, Happiness Advantage is one of those books where you recognize that what you're doing is useful for yourself and the people around you. So that's really great. But you were just talking about celebrating. And celebrating is my favorite thing to do. I'm a former competitive cheerleader. I was a collegiate cheerleading coach. Celebrating is in my soul because when we forget to celebrate, what we do is we are asking the people. So if you're leading a team and you forget to celebrate their accomplishments, even small ones, validating. We use the term validating a lot. What we're doing is we're celebrating the capacity for someone to do a thing that helps the rest of the team. Validation and celebration work in tandem. And there's a program that I built around project management. And the fast version of the story that I tell is, if we were on, I'm sorry, I talk really fast too. I'm sorry to everyone. They're going to have to listen at like 0.5 speed.
I know. I was like, whoa.
I know. Also,
the way it works around here is I say that again.
Oh, that's fine.
And I'm still thinking about something you said. And I'm a Jersey girl and I talk really fast. So hold on a second.
I know. If you were a child of the 80s and you remember the Micro Machine commercials.
Yes.
That guy.
That was, yeah, I remember it.
And it's because I'm so excited. So there's that. But what do you want to go back to before I go forward?
Don't ever apologize. I'm just super impressed because I love that normally I'm go. So it's awesome that I am like, whoa, this is awesome. Because the say that again, two things.
Okay.
Before, when you talked about the research, that is why, and I'm sure I've said this on the podcast before, but that's why I actually kind of started the podcast, because 11 years ago, when I was pregnant with her, I would always tell these stories about my pregnancy, TMI stories. And people would say, you should start a blog. But I remember I even found a notebook where I wrote notes of like, well, what's the point though? Like, if I'm going to tell people that I had the worst constipation in my life, where I called it a poogasm when I finally had it, because it was that good.
It's like the best way to describe that. Having been through 2 pregnancies and had a few poogasms along the way, I feel you.
There you go.
Yeah.
But it's like, if I'm going to put that out there to the world, like, why? Like, I'm not looking to just embarrass myself. Like, what is the real reason other than to make people laugh if I'm in conversation? And it was like, and then of course, just 10 years of life and all of this. And with the Brene Brown stuff about the authenticity, it was like, that is what I'm doing with all these TMI stories. Like, it's lowering the defenses, creating that comfort, and like making way for authentic connection.
Sure.
So now it's like, yes, I will be the girl that when I meet people now, it's like, you're the girl who pooped your pants. I'm like, yes, that is me. I will. Yeah. If that is like, because now that is like my core values of authenticity and genuine connection. So I love what you said about the research and how the more we lean into who we are, the more we learn, confirms and validates it versus having us look all over in 20 directions. So that was amazing. Loved that. So I feel like for people listening too, it's the same thing. Like, what keeps confirming and validating? Because
and you don't want to, it's tricky because you don't want to have such aggressive blinders that you lose opportunities to expand and, back to my word that I love, evolve. So who I am today should not be who I am tomorrow, because something will happen today. Either something will challenge me, something will invite me to have a new perspective, or my kids will come. Yesterday, so my kindergartner was teaching me, she loves the counseling component of school, and she gives me life lessons.
Mine too.
It's amazing. So yesterday was counseling day. And last night I don't share my children on my public social media because my partner and I talked about it. And that is a space that we feel is right for now. That may change over time, but for now I don't. But in my personal account, I shared this video of her because she came home, and last night we were in my office reading. We have 2 children and we take turns. So we read a whole chapter book with the first grader who's very great at reading. And then the kindergartner reads with the other parent, and we, alternate per book, because otherwise I don't know what's happening in the chapter books. And honestly, I didn't like not knowing what had happened in the preceding chapter. Yeah. Initially we were like, oh, we'll switch every night. And then both my partner and I, who like to learn and pay attention, are like, this is too hard. And we have to depend on a first grader to explain what happened in the last chapter. And that's not always like so the key. Sometimes she'll be like, well, there was a purple animal. Like that was her retention, or whatever stood out had nothing to do with the plot line. And I didn't know. So anyhow, but last night we were in here with my kindergartner. I was in here and we'd been reading, and she wanted to tell me about her day instead. And I cherish those moments, and she is developmentally fine with reading. So on nights when she wants to just talk about her day, I'm there. I'm in. My phone isn't even in the room when we have these evenings. But I had to go grab it because last night she said, Mom, do you know what we talked about today? I never know. And I never know which teacher or which classmate. It can always be anything. She said, we talked about fear. And today I learned It's really important that you don't let fear get in the way. Never let fear get in the way of the important things. This is my 5-year-old. So today, I'm a better person. I'm a different person. I have evolved from who I was yesterday because I was reminded by a 5-year-old through the lens of innocence about the role that most people let fear have that it doesn't need to have. So you continue to grow. And so research can be tricky because if you create a self-help version of a self-fulfilling prophecy and you only choose books that validate who you confirm and validate. So I like those, but I will tell you, I read books by authors that I definitely don't agree with. And I still walk away with things. There's a world championship poker player, Annie Dukes, who wrote a book called Thinking in Bets. And one of the things she talks about is the importance of having different perspectives around it. She also was in the middle of finishing a PhD in psychology. I can't remember. She needed money for her PhD and her brother was a world champion poker player. And just play poker. So she left that now she's a gajillionaire and does all this coaching, but she talks about how we can't make informed decisions if we are only selecting information we agree with or align with to be in our space.
Yeah.
So
that's why I do the podcast and love interviewing so many different people because that's funny. That's one of my other things is like, it didn't feel right for me to only be in the space of like in past things, to just like homogeneous or something.
Yes.
Is that the more scientific word? Yeah. And I love the evolution. I loved your description earlier of the daffodil and like growth. Because if you think it's the same thing, it just gets bigger.
Right.
Versus, a whole garden.
Yeah. So I love that. Really and cool. I love books that confirm that what I'm doing is a useful approach, but I recognize that someone else will read, before you send Samantha a note and say the happiness advantage is trash and it's the worst book ever. I know that book won't resonate with everyone. That's okay. But it is science that says the thing that I'm doing can be useful in a space. I also am, spoiler alert, an extreme extrovert. So how some of these concepts present in me as a human is going to be different than someone who is an introvert or even just a more mild extrovert. That's the authenticity piece. Here are some things that are useful. What does it look like in your person, through your lens, and on your lips?
Yeah.
So that's what I do. But when we talk about project management, back to celebration, this is the best. This is my favorite interview because we have gone more all over the place than any podcast interview I think I've done as of late. So you win. I know it wasn't a contest, but you win anyway.
I'll take it.
When we talk about project management, I use this narrative. If we were a team and I was the supervisor and we had this vision for taking a trip and I go through all the steps and ultimately as a part of this, the trip that we take is to Disney World. And part of the story is how we decide to get there, who rides with who, whatever, we're driving, we're stopping in these places, you do all these things. So the project is getting to Disney World. Most people get to Disney World, air quotes for those listening and not looking. Most people get to Disney World and don't let anyone get out of the car before they go to the next location. Celebration is getting out of the car and existing in the moment of the accomplishment. And if we don't let everyone get out of the car and exist in the moment of the accomplishment, if we don't intentionally integrate celebration into a process, we are asking everyone who participated to give less the next time.
And how does it work when people have different levels of celebration or how they celebrate different?
Fantastic question. Love that you asked it. Didn't even tell you to.
Thank you.
The narrative that I share is that celebration needs to match the magnitude of the accomplishment, and it needs to honor the contributor, not the celebrator. So if you are a person who doesn't like to be recognized publicly, and you do something that contributes to my team, my responsibility in supporting you, encouraging you, being your cheerleader is honoring where you are and how you want to be recognized. So I may say at a staff meeting, we couldn't have done this without Samantha. But separately, I may say to you, either in an email or in person, Samantha, I want you to know that there was this day that I was not sure we were going to make it to the other side. And that's the day that you turn in this piece. And I don't think I could have kept going without that. So I need you to know that you really changed my ability to be invested in this project. Because if that's what you need to hear, then I need to tell you that you need to be seen.
Yeah.
We talk a lot culturally, the phrase, she wants to be seen, he wants to be seen, they want to be seen. We use that phrase a lot. Professionally,
I use that phrase a lot.
But what does it mean to see someone? You need to see them as they want to be seen, not see them because you have on your Samantha glasses. For you to see me, you have to put on your Samantha glasses and then look through your Erika lens.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little different. I have in my house, again, will not surprise anyone, handheld glitter cannons, confetti shooters. Multiple. I said cannons, plural. This is not.
I was imagining like a t-shirt gun.
No, they're much smaller. They're these little things. My daughters can use them. Kindergarten and first grade, because I got a distinguished alumni award from the university that I did undergrad, and it was virtual because pandemic. My partner made sure that they were loaded and he sent them off. But what I didn't realize, so he set them off while I was getting my award and then giving my speech. They set it off right away when they announced my name. I did not see behind me while I was talking to everyone in this event that he was repacking them so that my children could set them off again. So during my window of time, I was showered with confetti twice by handheld confetti cannons, which was hysterical and scared the bejesus out of me. But if I use a handheld confetti cannon for getting out of bed, for getting to school on time, for any of those things, they lose their impact.
Yes.
When I work on college campuses, I like to reference the obligatory pizza party.
Yeah.
Everything doesn't merit a pizza party. And if you use the pizza party for something that didn't merit the pizza party, then what you do is you discredit the value of that pizza party when you need it. And then if you use something for a pizza party that really merits something bigger, you dilute how people feel about their own contributions. So you have to understand your team. You have to recognize and appreciate, oh, when I cross my legs, you can see that I'm in sweatpants. Hi, all. I'm in sweatpants and a professional top. That's what happens in life. Pandemic.
These are black pants that are from Costco that look like slacks, but they are sweatpant material. I'm living the dream, guys. And I now wear them in public. I didn't think I would, but I just can't go back to.
Now that we all wear masks, no one really knows who we are, especially if you throw in a ball cap. You can wear whatever you want in public now because nobody knows who you are. It's great.
Exactly. I've given
But celebration is about saying you did something that allowed us to reach our goal. You were part of us, and I want you to know your contribution to us, and that I saw it, that I value it, that I appreciate it. Sometimes it's, hey, you had to learn a whole new skill on this project. I appreciate your willingness to be you. And for me, my celebration always honors the authentic person. So I appreciate that when we were at a meeting and it was 2 a.m, Samantha, this didn't happen, but in my head it would 100% if we were on a team together. It's 2 a.m, we're getting close to deadline. And in the middle of that, you reminded us of your poop the pants story because we all needed a breath. And I appreciate that you recognized and could read the room and you were willing to be yourself for us in that moment, even if it was not as professional as some of the other folks at the table were behaving. But you gave us all that relief we needed from a point of tension.
Man, you know me. You just hit the nail on the head with that one.
It's like I did my research. I just love paying attention to your life because it's so fun.
Thank you. I love the validation and celebration. And once again, so I've been saying my mission and passion is helping people feel I want them to feel connected and seen. Yeah. And everything you just said, totally hit the nail on the head with feeling seen, because so often there's all these narratives out there. And it's like, if you're not connecting with it, it's not you. So it's like the celebration thing and all of that. It's like, well, that's great. But if it's not making that person, hit their buttons.
And it all ties into the neuroscience piece, which we haven't even talked about, but I can go for a little bit. So the neuroscience of satisfaction, and when I do this keynote or when I have multi-day retreats rooted in these concepts, it's big enough that it's really big, but you can make it pretty tight. The crux of all of it is you have 4 neurological channels that directly contribute to your sense of satisfaction. And the nerds in the neuroscience space have done all this research on people's brains and what's happening and all this stuff. The research is really great, but nobody wants to read research. They want to know what the research means in their own life. So that's what I do. My favorite part about the work that I do is I convert nerdery into practical application for the average human being.
Yay. Perfect. And I'm that average human. So lay it on me.
The other thing is I don't like the phrase average human being because I've never met one. I've never met an average person. I can say in 37 and some change years, I've met an incredible amount of exceptional people who didn't realize they were exceptional.
Is that what being average is?
Maybe.
Is being average not realizing how exceptional you are
Well,
because very few realize how exceptional they are?
Maybe. I don't know. That's a good thought. But average from a mathematical standpoint is the middle. It is the collective, not the middle, that's the mean, but the average, mean, median, mode, hello.
I was like, I know, that's the middle.
But the average is that we take, if you do the math, average is we take all of it together and divide it and say, what is the general vibe? Humanity doesn't have one of those. And if it did, it would be the most awful existence for all of us. That general vibe. Authenticity says, actually, no one's average because that doesn't exist.
Yeah. I like it.
I just made that up right now in this moment because I hadn't really thought about it. I've thought about that, but I've never verbalized it. So here we go.
That's my favorite thing about the podcast.
Yeah, exclusive content. But neuroscience says you have these 4 channels and they all work independently of each other, which is the tricky part. That means if you're really good at one, but you're not good at any of the other ones, it's the piece that explains why for some people, because the first one's very logical, and I'll share that in a minute, and you'll be like, oh, I'm really good at that. Most people are. As we move through, they get harder to maintain. And when I get to the second half, people realize, oh, I can appreciate that my sense of satisfaction about life, about my existence, about my role professionally, personally, whatever it is not where it could be because I don't know how to do those things or I don't put energy into it. So the first one is when we have positive emotions, how do we maintain them? It's really simple. Maintenance of positivity. If you're
watching Ted Lasso.
What's that? Oh my gosh, it's the best show. We can do a whole other thing. I'm doing a professional development program on leadership skills found in Ted Lasso. This is a thing.
If you need an assistant for it, please let me know because I am obsessed. And we'll do a whole other episode.
Believe t-shirt. I actually bought a bunch of Ted Lasso clothes. I'm not even lying.
So
I've watched the whole season 1 twice during.
Oh, we've done it 4 times. It's like
we didn't get to it
therapy.
until recently. So I would say I've done it twice in a very short period of time because I was late to the game, but it's so great.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So the first one is how do you maintain positive energy? Ted Lasso reference. It's sort of that. Well, we'll get to that. Ted Lasso reference.
We'll get that. We'll get there.
It comes in the second channel. So we'll start there.
Oh,
first one is how do you maintain positivity? So when you're having a great morning, when you wake up feeling great, what do you choose to do to keep that momentum of positive energy? How do you continue to do that? For me, when it comes to parenting, for example, we talk a lot about what's going well or what we liked. We have a lot of conversations in the moment about things that feel good. And then sometimes we'll even say, what can we do next? And how I frame that simple question is how I am helping cultivate their first channel of satisfaction. Because there's a huge difference between, okay, what's next? Versus we've just spent 3 to 5 minutes talking about how much fun it was to make this wreath out of pom-poms and glue guns, because glue guns for elementary school kids, it's like the greatest thing that ever happened. You can buy the low temp ones. They're world game changing. But we just had this thing. Who do you think might like one? What do you think we can do? So getting excited about a project and then saying, okay, now what should we do? So that's inviting that positive energy to move forward onto the next project. We can
inviting positive energy to move forward to the next project.
Yeah. That's good. Moving forward. This is that difference between moving forward and moving on. So moving forward, what am I bringing from my current positive state into the next environment or into the next project? The next one is how do we recover from negative emotions? I always think it's really important to highlight neuroscience doesn't say you can avoid them. It doesn't say how do we dodge negative emotions. It says, okay, they're going to happen.
How do we recover?
What do we do with that? How do we move on, release the negative emotions? So that is a very different concept than sustaining positivity. Releasing negativity is different. And that's where my Ted Lasso quote of be a goldfish kind of comes into play. You got to let it go. Yeah. That's what he's inviting you to do, is not carry forward any of the things that you know you don't want to repeat. Mm-hmm. So that second channel is when I'm struggling, how do I move forward? I will say that I had last week a hiccup with my own mental healthness, and I had what I call a slow burn panic attack. Mm-hmm. And for me, what that looks like is an amplified collection of anxious energy that has to go towards a project that I can visually see completed. But it can't be my work, even if it's doing a PowerPoint or whatever, because when I am in that anxious state, I cannot focus on work in a way that is useful. I'll have to go back and redo it. And I've learned this over time. But I could feel that negative emotion of, it was a mix of a couple of things that were going on in my life. And I was navigating some imposter syndrome a little bit. And then similarly, after I moved, it's sort of the spectrum of imposter syndrome is the other side of extreme imposter syndrome is I'm really capable, but should I think I'm really capable? Am I overconfident? And so I was working on something that was going really well, but it was in a new direction than I've been. And I knew I was going to do it really well, but then I had this moment of, am I supposed to know that? I think women do this to themselves more than men, has been my experience. But so when that started fueling, I am in tune enough with myself to recognize, okay, I have to step away from work. I have to step away from my computer and I have to do a thing. So I can tell you, if we had done this podcast interview last week, my office would look completely different because the bookcases used to be over here on either side of the window. And that used to not have a couch there. And all these, I mean, I hauled a sofa, a love seat up my stairs by myself in my slow burn panic attack because I could. It has legs. So I used the legs like handles and just like bounce it up the stairs. It was loud and obnoxious, but I did it because I needed to see it through. Yeah. When I have those negative emotions in that particular environment, I'm so in tune to what I need. And it's not immediate. Neuroscience doesn't say you have to immediately let it go. Because what we forget sometimes about how our physiology works is that, like, think about a fight. The idea of never go to bed angry is the worst advice ever. Here's why. It's terrible advice. It's the worst. Here's why. When you are in an argument with a significant other particularly, but anyone really, your adrenaline is increased. If you have ever done a physical activity, a sport of sorts, where your adrenaline is really high. I'm not a runner because I don't understand it, but I love that people love it and that's great for them. So maybe if you're a runner and you just finished a half marathon or a full marathon or an ultra marathon or whatever, you just finished a physical activity, you can't immediately go to bed. You can't immediately shut your body down because your body has to come down from those adrenaline levels. Physiologically, you can't just turn it off. So what you have to do then instead is decide what are your boundaries for a discussion, or for me, like I said, into this panic attack, when I recognize that it's happening, what am I equipping myself with? What knowledge am I equipping myself with to be able to use that differently? And to be able to move away from that energy and to say, okay, I hear you, I see you, mental health, but I'm not going to let you pull me down. I'm going to respond. One of the most useful things you can do is write a list of ways that you can counter negative emotions when you are in a positive mental state. And that's the key. Because when we're in a negative mental state, sometimes we can't see what might be useful because we're too far down that rabbit hole. So when you're having a great day, think, what about this day has made it great? And make a list. Or what in the past week, what have I done that has really helped sustain or create positive emotions? When you make that list, I always coach clients to even break it down into time increments, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, one whole day. Because if you only have a 15-minute window and you need to take a hike because that's the only list or the only thing on your list, you're sort of stuck. Creating this toolkit for your own self of when I have negative emotions, what can I do to acknowledge them, recognize them, and then respond to them in a way that will move me in a positive direction. So that's the second neurological channel. That one's harder, but it also makes sense.
Yes, totally.
The third one is the hardest, and it's the one that I'm the worst at. And I always own this. I've owned this in every keynote where I've done this because I feel like being human is important. I feel like being my authentic self is important. And I tell people this is a space that is really hard for me. The third channel is about tuning out the noise. And that can mean a lot of different things. For some people, that means meditating. But it's about your ability to focus on a task or be present in a moment and to quiet all of the external chaos. And related, some of the external chaos is actually just in your own brain. So inviting your brain to stop. When I was a yoga instructor, I loved teaching and I never took actual yoga classes. I only ever taught because the last part of a yoga class is always Shavasana. It is this quiet, meditative experience. When you are the instructor, you can't fully engage in that because you got to watch time and you got to be ready for this. And if you're leading a guided meditation, you got to do these things. So it was the way that I cheated because I never had to be alone with my thoughts because I always had to keep fueling the class. So I specifically designed a relaxing experience for myself in a non-relaxing way because I didn't want the relaxing component because it meant being alone in my brain. And at that time in my life, I was not interested in that. So I legitimately cheated myself from getting the full experience of a yoga class. As a teacher, I should never admit that, but I feel like it's fair to say like that's literally why I did it.
Yeah.
Because I loved yoga, I loved the classes, but I hated the end because I was not in a place where I was comfortable or confident in myself in ways that were useful. And so imposter syndrome and loud noise and self-hate would always come up at the end of a yoga class. Every single time. So when I started teaching, I got rid of all those things. Turns out that wasn't the right choice, but it worked for me at the time.
And it works for you to admit it now because that's the thing is how much are we doing that we think is good, but is not getting to the real.
Well, and I think I even knew at the time that it wasn't right.
Yeah. But it was
but
what
I didn't
you needed.
Realize,
yeah.
I didn't realize at the time that I was shortchanging my ability to have satisfaction from this neuroscience lens. So when I started doing this research, I was not in my relationship with my partner when I was teaching yoga really. And so when I told him the story about how and why I taught, and then I told him about this research, he's like, oh yeah, you didn't do it right. You're right. I did it. And I'm trying now. So there's a book called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics that a lot of folks I know have benefited from because the idea of meditation immediately transports them to a mountainside with quiet bells and the sound of nature and all of that. And the idea of doing that right now immediately increases my anxiety, even though I've said this to many people many times. It's just, that is not for me relaxing or calming. But the point is when you can bring down some of those levels of intensity that you're not choosing.
Bring down the levels of intensity that you're not choosing.
Yeah. Other things are contributing to your chaos. So when you start to learn how to tune out that noise, the opinions of others, even if it's just for a moment.
Yeah.
When I'm working on a new keynote or when I'm doing something, I have to invite my brain to focus on this one task and shut all the doors to all of the outside.
Yeah.
So learning how to focus, learning how to take a calming walk, learning how to it looks different for a lot of different people. So if you're listening, I don't want you to think you have to become a meditator or go to yoga and do it the right way. Although you should, because it's really great. I love it now.
I had to take a 6-week, it was for pain management, but it was meditative yoga, something. I can't, all of a sudden the name just lost me, but I'm so grateful for it because I feel like it taught me how to calm my brain, my mind. And now, it took literally like a 6-week, 2 hours a week, like learning how to do this, but now I can do it. And it wasn't like, oh, I can never I used to think it was like a badge of honor, to like never shut off your brain, just to always have thoughts. And we even did this activity where it was look out the window and come up with a story of something. And so of course I like do it. And I'm thinking, and she says, okay, now do it without thinking of anything. And you were supposed to notice the difference in how you felt. And what's funny is when I came out of the first thing where I had come up with the story, I was so impressed, like patting myself on the back, like, oh my gosh, I thought of a story like that, you know, a story from my life. I connected it. The snow, it made me think of this, and my brain, and like, I just had a whole movie play out in my head. And here, you know, I thought I succeeded at the task.
Yeah.
And that was to show how anxious my thoughts were. And then when I just kept pushing them away, and I mean, this was like week 4 of the week 6 or something. So it took that long to even just get to the ability to be able to push, you know, the thoughts away and just let them flow through. But now I'm like, thank goodness I did that class, because now I can actually take a breath.
Well, and here's another layer of, I think sometimes people are surprised that someone who presents as a person like me, who's loud, and I think I'm a physical representation of chaos, but like good chaos, but chaos nonetheless, would love the idea of moving towards this completely opposite of my general demeanor. But here's the piece that helps sometimes connect the value of it. So your prefrontal cortex is your thinking brain. It is the brain that you want to engage when you are making rational decisions and when you are making plans and doing all these things. The problem is your prefrontal cortex can only hold about 7 thoughts at a time, give or take 2 is what they say. So 5 to 9. So if of my 9 maximum thoughts, 7 of them are noise from other people, I can't make good decisions. I can't be engaged in my work fully if I'm wasting all of those tracks with runners that aren't me.
That's good.
So learning to tune out that noise is how you keep the prefrontal cortex engaged, and before you switch to your amygdala, which is your emotional brain. And that's not where you should make decisions, but that's where most of us do, because it's faster. So that's the thing that's really annoying, is your emotional brain scientifically is faster. It's faster at making decisions. It works faster. That's why we make irrational knee-jerk decisions, because that piece of our brain works, it clicks faster. It makes decisions quicker. So if we want to use the part of our brain that makes the most sound decisions, we have to give it the opportunity to have the time and to have all of that mental energy.
So good. So good. All right. What's that last track?
Now, this one will blow your mind.
I'm ready.
Because it has very little to do with like all the other pieces make sense. And I think this piece doesn't make as much sense until you flush it out.
Yes.
Look at me. You're welcome.
Thank you. Playing ball.
The last neurological channel is doing acts of service for other people without expecting recognition. So it's the idea that you are a good human and that you are an engaged human who's positively impacting the lives of other humans simply because you are in their proxy.
Yes.
It is the idea that when you're above ground, you get to make the life of someone else above ground easier, better, more positive. So this neurological channel says, if every time you do something good, you post about it, you're already getting that neurological reward because you're getting the likes or the whatever. And that's the dopamine cycle. And we don't have time to go into that, but that's what people do.
Yes.
And that's the reward that they're craving.
The likes and the follows and if I'm only doing this to get the likes, then.
If you get the likes and follows, then you don't actually get the long-term satisfaction, which has a different depth. So I sometimes will share when I do acts of kindness, random acts, those kinds of things, because either I involve my kids or it's something that maybe not everyone has thought of to do. So occasionally I will share those acts of kindness or generosity because I think people need a reminder, oh, I don't have $1 million. How can I make an impact? Or, oh, I don't have a lot of time. How can I make an impact? So sometimes when I do that, I'll share those things as a reminder that there are lots of different ways to positively impact the lives of people around you.
Yeah.
But when I do that, I have to do it knowing that by sharing that act, I will not get any long-term benefit in my sense of satisfaction.
So it like negates it?
Pretty much, yeah. Because the reward is external then, and satisfaction is actually an internal thing.
Oh.
You cannot. So here's the overarching theme, listeners and friends. You cannot seek satisfaction from external sources.
You cannot seek satisfaction from external sources.
It won't work.
Oh, so good.
What you can get from external sources is pleasure, but pleasure ends at the completion of the act or shortly thereafter. Think of the best meal you've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
It was really good in that moment. And maybe for a day or two afterward, you thought about it. But today in this moment, unless that meal was yesterday, it has zero impact on you. That's pleasure.
Man.
It's not satisfaction.
Whew. Erika, will you come back so we can flesh it out more? Because we just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
So good.
Yes, I absolutely will. I love this stuff. I love that it is a scientific way to once again tell people the things that they notice that work well in their lives are probably because they're supposed to. And the struggles that they have are probably because they haven't ever thought to approach them a different way. That's not to say that maintaining positive emotions and responding to negative emotions doesn't sometimes have a very specific and intentional mental health level and all those things. So this isn't to say that if you can just do these 4 things, you don't need, look, one of my favorite stickers, I don't have it, I don't know where I put it, it's somewhere, says, if you can't make your own serotonin, store-bought's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't saying if you do these things, you don't need support from other spaces. I want to be very clear about that. I think that everyone should have a therapist. I think when you turn 16, you should get a driver's license and a therapist. Some people need it way earlier than that, but that should be the latest point in life in which you start a relationship with a therapist. But these things are a framework so that on any given day, when you feel like self-doubt is creeping in, or when you feel like some of that like heaviness of just, I don't know if I have a purpose. I don't know if I have a place. I don't know if I've done anything right. When you start to feel some of those heaviness emotions, you can lean on these neurological channels to shift the dynamic back into deepening your sense of satisfaction instead.
Incredible. Incredible.
Or you can just come follow me on Instagram and I'll fill your life with cheerleading nonsense, because that's really what I do. If you need colors in your feed, I'm probably the person to follow, because it's usually loud, glittery glasses, lipstick, and earrings. That's what I live for.
Consultant Barbie. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your passion, your excitement. I'm so grateful. I'm so glad we got to cross paths and I will look forward to continue to follow you and connect on all of this, because I love it all. So if people want to get in touch with you, of course, I said Consultant Barbie on Instagram. How else can they get in touch with you?
That's the best place, because here shortly I'll have a website that's launching. It's just not ready yet. So I would say Instagram is the best place. Plus, it's the best place if you don't ever want to directly interact with me to get some of this insight, because I'm a big fan of sharing free content. I don't think that anything I have is so important that you have to buy it from me, because I'd rather see you succeed, even if I never know about it. So, I mean, Instagram is really the place where I'm trying to give everyone these concepts and ideas, not just on satisfaction, on a lot of different things. So it's a great resource. And for now, probably the best place to find me.
Awesome. Well, I love your views with authenticity and satisfaction and all of it. I love how it just is also connected. So thank you for sharing your self-proclaimed nerd passion with me and everyone. And I can't wait to flesh it out more with you.
And that's a wrap for now.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and rate us on iTunes. For all things Flushing, visit our website at flushingitout.com. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.